Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan stepped into the council chambers, ready to give perhaps the most crucial report of either of their lives, perhaps in the history of the Republic. They had just experienced a warrior on Tatooine with a red blade fighting in the Jedi arts. And that wasn't even the half of it. Qui-Gon had found a young boy, Anakin Skywalker, with the highest midichlorian count he'd ever seen. This boy is the chosen one, the one to bring balance to the Force, and Qui-Gon knew it. The Jedi needed him to restore balance, but Qui-Gon was not sure how the Jedi would truly react. This boy, he'd form attachments with his mother, but also the crew he met on Tatooine. His emotions were rampant. He was already too old to be trained. Could Qui-Gon trust the Council to do what needed to be done despite the flaws? The two entered the Council chambers and began giving their report on the Sith Lord. This, to Qui-Gon, was undeniable. He'd felt the power and the evil from the Zabrak as he dueled him on the sand. The Sith had returned, but the Council was still reluctant. "Impossible. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium," said Ki-Adi-Mundi, as if it mattered. "I do not believe the Sith could have returned without us knowing," said Mace Windu. How arrogant, Qui-Gon thought. This clearly only makes the Sith more dangerous. He did not say this. Instead, he just nodded his head and turned to Yoda. "Hard to see, the dark side is," he said, and Mace finished with a strangely quick talk that this was. He said, "We will use all of our resources to find the identity of your attacker." And just like that, the Council, they were done discussing. Qui-Gon was frustrated. How could they not be wary of the Sith? And then Yoda spoke up again. "More to say, have you?" Qui-Gon sat there for a long second, and then began speaking words he never imagined himself actually saying. "I can no longer be part of this Jedi Order. A different path has called to me, and I must trust in the Force to follow it," Qui-Gon said. He made a last-minute snap decision that he was sure the Force had truly called upon him to make. He could not turn the Chosen One over to the Jedi. Qui-Gon knew the Council to be wrong about many things. He'd felt they allowed the Jedi Order to become sort of the Chancellor's police, rather than concentrating on knowing the Force. Yes, they were wise to refuse to rule, but unwise to simply accept what was going on. The Council was shocked, but Qui-Gon wasn't willing for a debate, and as he stepped away, his surprised apprentice walked out of the chambers behind him. "Master, what are you talking about? You can't leave. What about me? What about the young boy, Anakin?" Obi-Wan said. "As I told you on Naboo, Obi-Wan, you are ready to move on and take the trials. As for Anakin, he's coming with me. I'm trusting you to keep this to yourself, Obi-Wan. Only you and I know of what he can become. If trained incorrectly, it could twist and destroy the prophecy." The two chatted for a moment longer before Qui-Gon said his final goodbyes. Qui-Gon was going to take Anakin. He was going to take him and train him to be balanced in the Force, train him on the path to becoming the full power Chosen One. But before going to get Anakin, he had one other person he needed with him on this. "Master Dooku," Qui-Gon said as he approached the man who trained him to be a Jedi. "A moment, please." And Qui-Gon, trusting in the Force to guide him, told Dooku everything. He told Dooku he'd encountered a Sith, and he'd discovered a boy with the highest midichlorian count he'd ever seen. The Council would have been skeptical on both of these aspects, but Dooku trusted him. He'd gone to Dooku because it was him who showed him not to trust the Council or the Senate, but instead trust through the Force. Qui-Gon needed him. "Master, come with me. We must train the boy correctly to truly restore balance." Dooku thought about this, turmoil building inside of him, as it had been now for many months. He too had plans of leaving the Jedi, and he felt a growing hatred, anger, for how they dealt with the Force. "I will join you, Qui-Gon," Dooku finally said. Then Qui-Gon went and found Anakin, now near Padme's quarters. "I wanted to say goodbye," Anakin said. "The two of you have formed a unique bond," Qui-Gon told him. "Go tell her goodbye and join me outside. You will be trained as a Jedi by me and my former master. We will go to a remote planet far from here. You will be a Jedi, but not in the traditional sense. Say your goodbyes and meet me outside." Anakin nodded, and the two then boarded Dooku's ship once Anakin found him. Dooku was already waiting inside, and the two discussed, Dooku saying to Qui-Gon, "I assume you have a destination in mind, yes?" "Perhaps the first Jedi temple," Qui-Gon told him in response, "the remote outer world of Ahch-To," and the trio set off for Ahch-To. This, of course, was a remote world harboring the first Jedi temple that very few knew about, that they had decided, that Qui-Gon had decided this would be their destination to go and train Anakin. It was very powerful in the Force and very well hidden, very remote. And they arrived eventually. They arrived on Ahch-To, they set up, and very quickly Anakin began his training under the tutelage of Dooku and Qui-Gon. Dooku had told the Jedi Order that he planned on leaving the Order and returning to his home world of Serenno. He was to take over as the Count of Serenno, and he still did so despite going to Ahch-To with Qui-Gon and Anakin. It was his plan, and he now spent his time 50-50 between Serenno and Ahch-To, acting as both a great Jedi Master to Anakin and Qui-Gon, and the Count of Serenno. Years passed, and Anakin was now about 15 years of age, seemingly as powerful as some of the Masters on the Council. He was much more outgoing, happy, and just more himself than the robotic version we saw of him in the prequels. Qui-Gon allowed him to feel, allowed him to use the Force through his emotions. Trust only in the Force, he'd taught Anakin. For the Jedi, back on Coruscant, they didn't take the warning of Qui-Gon seriously, back many years ago now, and had sent Obi-Wan to Naboo alone. There he had encountered Maul and had been killed by Maul. And then the Council did acknowledge the Sith truly had returned, but it took the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi for them to truly realize what had happened. And eventually, a party of Jedi led by Mace Windu pinpointed the location of Maul, killing him, leaving Sidious without a dark-side apprentice. Dooku, now meditating back on his castle of Serenno, while the Jedi were in disarray about the Sith, Palpatine without an apprentice, Anakin and Qui-Gon training on Ahch-To, Dooku was in meditation. He began to feel a strange darkness wash over him. The darkness got stronger and stronger until Dooku realized this presence was with him in the castle. He hadn't been alerted to anyone entering, but he knew he was not alone. "Who's there?" he called out. "Dooku, former Jedi, Count of Serenno," a voice spoke, and a mysterious cloaked figure appeared. While training on Ahch-To, the trio of Jedi had determined that the Sith had an unknown master. It wasn't just the Zabrak that Qui-Gon had encountered. There had to be someone more powerful. They could feel the Sith, the raw evil power, and now, as they had determined, there was a master, and he was standing before Dooku. "I can feel your anger and resentment towards the Jedi," Sidious continued, eventually asking Dooku to be his new apprentice, to replace Darth Maul. Sidious promised that if Dooku joined the Empire, he would not only lead the separatist movement in a civil war, but also the eventual empire that Sidious planned to create. This decision was not an easy one for Dooku. He knew, back on Ahch-To, he could continue to train Anakin, continue to work with Qui-Gon, or he could capitalize on his greed, on his wants, on the power he wanted right now, to join the Sith and rise to eventual high Emperor power. Dooku thought about it, but he had become much more balanced and despised both the Sith and the current Jedi. He'd become extremely powerful. Likely not powerful enough to defeat the Sith Lord, he thought, but powerful enough to at least escape. "Your thoughts betray you," Sidious said as he ignited a red saber. "If you will not join me, you will die." And a blue lightning bolt fired at Dooku, who caught it and tucked it away, similar to how Yoda did in Attack of the Clones. "Ah, you have been training without the Jedi. No matter," and he leapt at Dooku as the two engaged in a ferocious duel. Red Saber versus Red Saber, the most evil being in the galaxy, versus a former Jedi, well-balanced in all aspects of the Force. Sidious definitely had the edge, but not enough to deter Dooku from destroying the window behind him in his palace and jumping out onto his ship. As soon as he had felt the Dark Lord's presence, he'd pressed the comlink on his wrist to ready his ship in case of a quick escape. And that he had needed. He leapt onto his ship, but he couldn't help but feel as if this escape was too easy, as if Sidious, after sensing he'd been training, was beginning to let him go. That thought did not sit well with Dooku, who took off immediately for Ahch-To, knowing he likely would not be able to come back here, knowing his time now was to be spent on Ahch-To training to defeat this Dark Lord. And now back on the planet, Anakin felt a tremor in the Force. "Dooku," he muttered. "I felt it too," Qui-Gon responded. "He was in trouble, but I sense he is still alive and on his way here." The two waited for his eventual return, and when Dooku finally did land, he rushed up to Anakin and Qui-Gon, telling them what had happened. "The Sith approached me to join him, but I refused. I believe in the balance of what we are doing here. He was more evil and powerful than anyone I'd ever encountered, and I fear my escape was far too easy. He will be searching for us. He could sense my training and was continuing, and will want to find where we are." The three had been working on masking their presence here, masking their presence through the Force, similar to how the Sith had masked their presence on Coruscant. They felt like they were succeeding, and to this point, no Jedi nor Sith had approached them through the years, and they could only hope that continued. Through the next handful of years, the three decided to continue training as they were. Qui-Gon and Dooku knew the only person who would be able to rival this Dark Lord was Anakin, the Chosen One, and they would begin continuing training him until he was more powerful than the Sith Lord. Across the galaxy now, a civil war was brewing between the Sith, leading the Separatists, and the Republic, with the Jedi on their side. With Dooku gone, Palpatine had to change his plans. Instead of one true apprentice, he'd brought on Sith assassins, Ventress, General Grievous, and Pong Krell, the evil Jedi now. They would train rigorously, trying to become a true Sith apprentice, but Palpatine was simply building a small Sith army, knowing deep down his next apprentice would be wherever Dooku had escaped to. He knew Dooku, Qui-Gon, or whoever else may be on the planet, would be his next apprentice. On Ahch-To, the Jedi trio had decided to stay out of the war, as their goals were beyond protecting the Republic. The Force, it had never felt more out of balance. Aside from this planet, where Anakin, Dooku, and Qui-Gon had separated, the Force was in all sorts of disarray. They were so far from their old ways in the light. These three now, they were balanced. They were at least becoming much more balanced, unlike the Jedi they sensed, who were far too in the light, far too dogmatic in their ways, and the Sith, who were pure evil. They decided to stay out of the war, although there was some conflict about it. "Are you sure we should not help in the war? Countless Jedi will die," Anakin asked one day. He never really knew the Jedi at all, aside from Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and now Count Dooku. But he still knew they were the good guys per se. "This is the galaxy and the Force attempting to correct itself. It has been out of balance for far too long," Qui-Gon responded. "We must let this play out and make our move once this war is coming to an end." That is what the three decided on. They would let this war play out. Whoever was the victor would be severely wounded, severely knocked down in troops, in army, and they would attack from there. A few years later now, the war raged on. The Jedi were beginning to lose. Sidious and his assassins had moved on the Jedi Temple with an army of clones. Most of the Jedi were dead, but some had scattered around the galaxy. And during the war, the trio had come up with a plan. This war had only grown their belief that balance was needed by any means necessary, and they would move on the prevailing side before they could restore their own order. In this case, the Sith had prevailed, and now was the time for the former Jedi to act. If all went well, they would come in, destroy the Sith, and lead on their own. Dooku was trained in politics, and he could, if enough convincing the Senate, could be promoted to Chancellor if all went well. And after years of countless training duels, learning to control the Force, and even learning to achieve life after death, the former Jedi were ready to move on the Sith. "This is not over," Palpatine told Pong Krell, the only surviving Sith assassin from the attack on the temple. 2 Jedi Masters have remained hidden since that fool Maul revealed himself on Tatooine. I've sensed their powerful presence in the Force, but could not find them. But now they are coming to us, Palpatine said. The former Jedi landed outside of the Senate building, all 3 calm, but beyond ready to finally achieve their goals and help fulfill the prophecy of the Chosen One. The 2 former Masters, Qui-Gon and Dooku, stepped into the Senate office where Sidious resided. Along with him was Pong Krell, who they recognized as their former Jedi friend. A door behind the Sith opened, and suddenly 30 or so clone troopers surrounded the Jedi. Palpatine spoke. I don't expect to surrender, and I knew you'd be here eventually. I'm more than prepared to kill you both and rule alone. I don't need an apprentice any longer. But I sense another with you, someone strong in the Force. And suddenly, all 30 clones began holding their throats and floating into the air. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, walked into the room, holding his hand in the air and closing it once he locked eyes with Sidious, killing all 30 clones with ease. We thank you for getting rid of the Jedi, but your rule is at a swift end, Anakin told him. Sidious was shocked. How had this boy been hidden from him? His presence in the Force was perfectly balanced, and his power far exceeded even his own. He couldn't have that much battle training, though, thought Sidious. He couldn't. Maybe he could be manipulated. Maybe. Finally, Sidious made a move, sending a Force pulse that was so strong it blew away all the walls, and from the ceiling it was gone, revealing the Senate chambers above. Krell, Qui-Gon, Dooku were thrown backwards enough to leave just Anakin, who did have to take a step back when the pulse hit him. You will not defeat me, Sidious said, and Anakin then ignited his blue saber and approached the Sith Lord. As he approached, he reached up into the Senate chambers, grabbing 15 pods and threw them down at Sidious. Sidious destroyed them all with a strong burst of lightning and ignited 2 red sabers. Krell, kill the other 2, Palpatine demanded before leaping up into the Senate. But not into the pods. No, Anakin was too powerful to fight in that setting. Palpatine went into the halls where Anakin could not throw the pods at him. In the hallways, at least Palpatine thought he had a fair advantage. He tried to sense anger, resentment, hatred, anything to use to manipulate this boy, but he found nothing but calm, battle-focused rage centered around only this moment. It appears as if Qui-Gon and Dooku have taught him to live only in the present, something Palpatine feared. The 2 now dueled for what seemed like forever, the epitome of evil versus the Chosen One. The Chosen One, Palpatine thought, hidden from him, trained from a young age to wield and listen to only the Force, neither Jedi nor Sith, with angst toward both groups. It was hidden from him somehow as he had built up this army, built up this empire. He had not seen this coming, and he could not kill Anakin. This was the end for him, he feared. If I can't kill you, I will kill your pathetic masters, Sidious screamed as he pushed Anakin back just enough to leap away back to the Senate floor. Sidious, when he got down there, saw Dooku cut down Krell in a final strike as Qui-Gon knelt close by, clearly a bit wounded. Krell served his purpose, Sidious thought, and pulled Qui-Gon into the air, electrocuting him, about to break his neck, when a blue saber cut his hand off. Anakin, sprinting after Sidious, was controlling his saber with the Force and had sliced his hand off with the saber in the air. Anakin had enough of Sidious, enough of his words, enough of everything. He was clearly a master manipulator. Anakin realized as he'd gotten as far with his political and manipulation tactics as his Force abilities. He was Chancellor, now Emperor, and the Sith Lord, and Anakin was tired of it. He crushed Sidious's windpipe with the Force, along with cutting off his other hand, and the battle was over. Sidious could not object, he could not manipulate. He knelt there, hands cut off, unable to speak. Qui-Gon was severely hurt from the lightning, but he was alive, as all three former Jedi gathered around Sidious. "What's my next move, Master?" "Kill him, Anakin. Kill him now," spoke Dooku. "Yes, Master," and Anakin brought his blue saber, along with a red one from Sidious, across his neck and cut his head off. Balance was restored. In the aftermath of the battle, neither side had truly won the war. The Republic had lost its Jedi protectors, but the clones were still loyal to the Republic and whoever led. The Separatists were in complete disarray, with all their leaders killed off. Someone had to step in. Someone had to lead the Republic, and that would be Chancellor Dooku. Back on Ahch-To, Qui-Gon and Anakin decided to become the Grand Masters of a new order, the Jedi Order, an order of Force wielders that focused on balance of the Force, not light, not dark, but using both to create balance. Survivors from the Jedi Purge and younglings found around the galaxy were brought here. Keepers of the balance, keepers of the peace, the Jedi would protect, they would serve, but only the will of the Force. And Chancellor Dooku understood this, leading the Republic from afar, giving up most of his Jedi abilities and Jedi time just to lead the Republic with his political prowess. Now this would go on for a while. And Anakin, very well balanced, had never encountered anything that would push him out of balance, anything that could push him out of balance, until one day. He was exploring through the Senate, talking with his master Dooku, and there was the senator from Naboo. "Padme?" Anakin exclaimed. And Padme looked at him and went, "Annie, my goodness, you've grown." Alright, that's where we're going to end it today. I kind of just added that last part in. I thought, hey, if I want to do a part 2, I can build on Anakin and Padme's relationship, go from there. Why not? What did you think? It was, I think it was pretty good. Story was it was a bit of, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I had fun. Third one, 400 subscribers special. Thank you. Leave a like, subscribe. That would mean a lot. And, yeah, give me your comments. I'd love to hear them. Thank you, everybody. Peace.